Hi, and welcome to a very special edition of the Senator Brian A. Joyce Report. Today we're actually broadcasting from the Norfolk County Correctional Institute. I have with me our Norfolk County Sheriff, Mike Bellotti. Today we're going to hear from Sheriff Bellotti. We're also going to hear from Assistant Superintendent Mary Kelly. We're going to have an interview with the Programs Director, Bob Cahill, an interview with a caseworker, Jim Burgess, who's also a town councilor in Randolph, and a correctional officer, Alex Mann. We're also going to have an interview with one of the incarcerated inmates, and finally end up with an interview with an assistant superintendent, Patty Spataro. So I have the pleasure of representing Norfolk, Bristol, and Plymouth counties in the Massachusetts Senate. And in addition to the state correctional institutions, we have county correctional institutions. Here in Norfolk County, run by Mike Bellotti, comes from a storied political family. Many of you remember his father, Frank Bellotti, longtime Attorney General, well-respected Democratic leader in Massachusetts for decades. His son, Mike, has carried the family tradition, the family name on proudly, and has done remarkable things here as sheriff, and welcome.
Senator, thank you very much. I appreciate your leadership in those issues that impact us, and also you taking the time today to educate the folks in your district what we do every day in county corrections.
Well, we're going to talk about what you do. So Mike Bellotti attended Boston College and also the New England School of Law. He and his family, his wife and 3 children, live in Quincy. And he's known as a, I guess, programs, is that right? Program sheriff.
Yeah, we focus very much on programs that help the offenders the day they come in here in terms of reentry, education, mental health issues, substance abuse. We've been recognized nationally through the rewarding of many millions of dollars of grants since I've been here.
So how do you determine what program is appropriate for what inmate is likely to benefit from a particular program, and frankly, who is likely to reoffend?
That is, you basically said exactly, the context and the approach we take with every inmate. The moment they come into the jail, they're assessed by different disciplines throughout incredibly professional, well-trained staff here at the Sheriff's Office that look at the different needs that an offender will have within 14 days of their incarceration. The average incarceration time is about 115 days in the Sheriff's Office, so we have to move quick. We're doing things more and more evidence-based tied to reentry. We're looking at areas of health care, mental health, substance abuse, education, vocational. We have partnerships throughout the county in those areas, including recovery homes. So it's moving quick, it's using great staff, and we have a lot of partnerships with human service providers, vendors, folks, and contractors that come into the Sheriff's Office every day and work one-on-one in a group setting with the offenders.
Said something about reentry. What does that mean? That's a word we hear, a buzzword we hear a lot.
Yeah, reentry it's the new buzzword in corrections for the past several years. It's tailoring evidence-based programs so that offenders are leaving the Sheriff's Office, and again, nobody's serving more than 2.5 years here, so you have to move very quick in terms of how you marry them to programs. But reentry is making sure that when they enter the community, it isn't like the old days where it was $5 for the bus, no connection to any resources, no accountability. Now they're tied to a whole list and host of different agencies that we've partnered with in the areas of recovery homes, adult education programs. We have partnerships with Maynard Health Centers in Quincy and Weymouth and South Shore. A lot of those folks come into the Sheriff's Office or the jail here in Dedham and start working with offenders almost immediately, so that comfort level, that connection, that hopefully seamless transition back into the community is one that is supported. It's one that ties the offender into really the right environment in targeting those areas that they might need the most help in.
So it seems like, I mean, as much as a penal institution, there's a lot of social work going on.
Yep, we're marrying public safety really with social work programs and human services. More and more, I think there's an expectation that the sheriffs in the Sheriff's Office in Massachusetts are to be strong partners with everybody else in law enforcement in helping reduce crime.
So what has it been successful? This reentry program, is it reducing recidivism?
That's a good question. Right now, we are partnering with Northeastern University over the next 12 to 18 months to research, analyze, and statistically prove the success of our programs. We believe anecdotally, we believe by what kind of statistical research we've done, whether formal or informal, that these programs work. The stories of each offender as they leave here, and it's been proven nationally by many different statistical analysis through different groups that if offenders are tied to the community when they leave here, and there's some accountability, they will have a much better success of being productive citizens. So we believe in our hearts, based on national studies, that it works, but we're going to go a step further, and we are measuring and looking at statistically every single program we have. And if a program doesn't prove to be really conducive to reentry, then we have to look at whether or not we need that program.
Give me an example. So a person comes into the Norfolk County House of Corrections, typically some involvement with drugs, some involvement with alcohol. What's it?
Anger management, might be some mental health issues. One example is this, a very basic example, education. If an offender comes in here and doesn't have a high school degree, we have a very strong GED program. Mm-hmm. The success rate is over 90% in terms of those offenders that go through the program and then take a test. Now they're leaving with a high school degree, essentially. And that's an easy assessment. We ask them, we do the administrative checking out whether or not they have a high school degree, and we do have partnerships with some high schools that can actually get a degree, for example in Quincy, with a North Quincy High degree program, not just GED. But that is one basic area. We work very strongly, and we also have partnerships with some junior colleges or community colleges throughout Norfolk County and the South Shore, so that, again, the taxpayers aren't paying for that tuition, but many times an offender can get a letter of acceptance to a junior college or community college program before they leave here. Education is, again, one of those examples. Another example is housing. We want to make sure that the continuum of stepping down back into the community when they leave here is, again, seamless and incremental. So we do have some great partnerships with recovery homes. For example, North Cottage in Taunton. When an offender is leaving here and they've done what they really are supposed to do in terms of programming, and they've had successes in these four walls, it's not enough just to end that type of challenge for them at the door here as they leave. We want to make sure that they're going into a setting that's going to increase their chances of being a complete success story. And we have a partnership with North Cottage in Taunton. We essentially bought 4 beds, and offenders can, if it's based on the right classification, which we'll talk about shortly, that they can step down and have a place and still continue that programming, that important programming.
Okay, so we have a very difficult economy, very challenging economy the last few years. Has that both added to the crime rate, the incidence of folks being sentenced to the Norfolk County House of Correction? And second, has it made it more difficult on the other end when maybe an inmate has attained a GED or learned some job skills, but there are no jobs out there?
I think it's accepted that this economy obviously has affected folks in terms of unemployment and losing their homes, and that can begin a downward spiral. It also can be a greater challenge to live a more productive life. But also we know that the programs have been cut, so there's more gaps outside of corrections in mental health in other areas. Has
funding in those areas been cut?
They've been cut. So now we have to figure a way through federal granting, which we've been very successful, federal grants, to kind of make up that money or recoup that money. This particular year, we have about $700,000 in federal grant money dedicated to reentry programs, mentoring programs, et cetera, that I just talked about. That's new money. We're not increasing the payroll by hiring more public employees. We're bringing in partners from the outside, the people that have success on the outside. Like I said, the human service programs, Volunteers of America. They have been doing these type of things in the community. Now they're coming in here on federal grants. And we've cut our staff by 15% in the past 4 or 5 years. That does take a toll, but we just have to retool. We have to get more creative, and we have to do it in a way that is based on collaboration and partnerships.
What's the total budget for the Norfolk County House of Correction?
Right now, I think we filed a budget for this existing year for about $28 million.
$28 million. And how many inmates?
On the average, the high 600s. Typically, no higher than 700, but that's what we're responsible on a given day, any day. Daily population about 700.
So the argument is not only it's good for society to provide some learning skills, some treatment, etc., that would turn folks into productive tax-paying citizens, but there's a fiscal argument.
There's a fiscal argument. If we can make sure these folks don't come back, and not even just don't come back, make sure they're not recommitting crimes and tying up resources in the courts, and again, not providing or being more productive, then we're going to save the government money. Right now, we do have programs that target what we call repeat offenders. Those are the ones you really want to tie these programs to. There are some people that come in here who don't have as many issues. They might have housing, they might have an intact family, they might have a college degree.
Let me ask you this, because in our business and politics, it's politically prudent to be tough on crime. Remember Governor Weld talking about the joy of breaking rocks and everything else. But you talk about folks with substance abuse issues, with mental health issues, with a whole host of issues. Do you ever stop and think, there, but for the grace of God, go I?
Yeah, I mean, we're community-based. Yeah. So we're seeing people from Quincy, Milton, Dedham, Weymouth. They're committing the crimes. It's those type of crimes, third, fourth, fifth OUI because of a substance abuse problem. Nationally, it's been accepted that about 80% of the population in any given facility of the inmates have some type of drug and/or alcohol problem. So, tough on crime. It's really smart on crime. Bill Weld, it was a great slogan, and it worked for him. And I think people want to see some type of punitive measure attached to committing a crime. We all understand that. We're still a public safety agency. The courts, the police, sheriff's offices. It's our responsibility to make sure there is some punishment, because there's an argument that does help deter and keep other people from committing crimes. But once you have them in a facility like this, it's really more about accountability and challenging the offender to do those things that fill those gaps that led them there in the first place.
Okay.
And that will save money in the end.
Well, Mike Bellotti is a modern sheriff doing a terrific job in Norfolk County, and we're going to come back to Mike. We're going to get a few guests in here on this roadshow version of the Brian A. Joyce report. Next person is going to be the superintendent for classification and reentry that you just talked about, Mary Kelly. And if you see in the background, by the way, you see the bunks. We have inmates actually housed here in what was the basketball court, correct?
Yes.
So overcrowding, we're just doing away with recreational facilities. So Mary Kelly of the Braintree Kellys, let's talk, what does the term classification mean? You're the traffic cop for this place, right?
Yes, I am. Classification begins as soon as someone enters the building, and meaning they come from court, they're admitted, they're booked, and classification is a process that determines housing, determines their program plan. We have several assessment
You have folks in here before they've been sentenced, right?
Yes, yes, we do. We have pretrial population and sentence population. Historically, it was 1/3 pretrial, awaiting trial, and 2/3 sentenced, which means they've received a sentence from the court, and we have them for a fixed amount of time. That has changed rather dramatically in the last year.
And so that fixed amount of time has to be less than 2.5 years.
Yes.
Otherwise, they'd be in the state prison system.
Yes.
Okay.
With that being said, right now our population is about 50% awaiting trial and 50% sentenced. So it's really split.
The 50% that have been sentenced, they've been sentenced for misdemeanors?
No, felonies. Felonies and misdemeanor. But approximately 99% of the population, both awaiting trial and sentenced, will leave this facility and re-enter. They'll re-enter to our local communities.
99% of the folks that are here in the House of Corrections will re-enter society.
Yes.
So it behooves us to ensure that they're well prepared. Contrast that, Sheriff, if you can, with the state correctional institutions. Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, the state system, the sentence is much longer, 5, 10 years, life. So when they're dealing with re-entry and they're meeting the population, it's a little bit different than us. We're moving quicker. We have to, again, marry the offender to resources and programming almost immediately.
Almost immediately.
Whereas when you have a life sentence in the state system, it's more about management of that population.
Okay, so here, as soon as an inmate comes in, you're already thinking how to successfully integrate them back into society.
Yes.
And that's essentially your job?
Yes.
Or it's everyone's job,
It's
I guess?
everyone's job, and we work as a team here. And what I mean by that is when they come in, what we call the back door through the Sally Port, there's a booking process. You know, fingerprints and photos and criminal histories are run. So we work with a lot of law enforcement partners to ensure that that documentation is done correctly. Along with that, the sheriff has given us the resources to have a 3 to 11 shift caseworker. That caseworker is responsible for the classification. So that night, the minute he comes in the door, we put him in appropriate housing. Safety and
And
security.
we say he. Do you have women come here?
No.
All men?
All men.
Okay.
We do, for the female offenders who were sentenced out of Quincy District Court and the other district courts throughout Norfolk County, technically they're still under our jurisdiction. But because it was not a female offenders housing unit here, or jail or house of correction, anywhere in Norfolk County, they become the responsibility of the state system in Framingham. So it's a little bit like a county setup in terms of how they move through programming and classification. On any given day, I think we're going to have up to 30 female offenders.
Sentenced, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, in Norfolk County, but they go elsewhere.
Different.
So a man who's been sentenced comes here, and there's right away there's a social worker
Yes.
on top of that case?
Yes,
For
right
what
away.
purpose?
We do an objective classification tool that's point-based. So there's 8 different levels without getting into the details, but there's 4 levels of custody. So someone could come in maximum security, they would go right to segregation all the way down to minimum security. The beginning stages, the first 10 days would be in this building to ensure that we've got all of the documentation and all the assessment tools conducted. We want to look at their risk to reoffend. We want to look at their program needs. I mean, does this, the person that came in have an issue with anger management, as the sheriff said, or substance abuse, which is more than 80% of our population. We want to make sure that we provide them with the tools if they want to.
So we've had really an explosion in society of this opiate addiction. Young people of all social classes, could happen to any one of our kids, get hooked on whether it's OxyContin or heroin. Someone comes in. I mean, we have, just in my own neighborhood, we have a rash of break-ins, and it's junkies that need a fix, and they're looking for money. And so a person comes in that's hooked on, say, heroin or on some other scourge, some other drug. What do you do for them?
So that first night, we get them into housing.
And by the way, there's a significant segment that's watching that would say, what the hell do we do anything for them for?
Right.
But the sheriff makes the point they're going to be re-entering society. We want to get them on the straight and narrow.
And it's good public safety.
Good public safety.
I mean, it's a combination of factors here. I mean, we're talking the most critical point in any released individual's time is 72 hours after they're released. If we don't send them back into the community with some tools that they might have gained here, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's hooking them up with men at health for mental health and medical issues, mass rehab, Department of Mental Health, we have a high number of duly diagnosed individuals here, so we're talking substance abuse and mental health issues. So that's a good portion of our sentence population, because we gear it towards sentence population, meaning we know how long we have that individual for, we know what we need to do right
as
from the get-go.
opposed to the pretrial population.
Right. Who could go to court in the morning and not come back. I mean, that's an issue that we deal with every day. However, as the sheriff said, with the average length of stay about 115 days, our turnaround time has to be very, very quick. So we have a lot of staff that are dedicated to getting the classification done appropriately.
So your average sentence is how long?
115 days.
Wow.
So, but that's, again, we have the 2.5-year person with a 10-day person. So, it runs the gamut, but we run that stat monthly, and it varies anywhere from 110 to 120 days. Last month, as the sheriff said, it was 115 days. So we have to have staff that do efficient systems that are all validated. We've brought in a lot of assessment tools. We do use the LSIR, which in the trade people know. We also do a proxy to risk to reoffend. We want to get that high-risk offender so that when he is released, public safety is aware. We work with partnerships with the local police departments through the repeat offender program, with the courts for probation, with parole. We actually transport the repeat offenders to the parole office, not only if they were paroled, but if they're a straight release, so that they can meet with the community that they're going to go to. So if they're going back to Quincy, they go to the Quincy parole office. Quincy will give them some referrals, local AA meetings, the dates, the times, all of that, and a lot more comprehensive stuff than that. But just as that 72 hours is critical upon release.
And do you have any statistics at all on repeat offenders?
Yes. Yes.
What are
I
they?
mean, our repeat offender population is geared sentenced only and accounts for about 50% of our population. Now, the criteria for that is they have to be serving a second or subsequent offense. Not just here, it could have been a state sentence, another county sentence, a federal sentence. And they also have to be doing 6 months or longer. Reason being, we have to have a captive audience to work with so that we can do the collaborations with the local partners, not just the law enforcement.
So what's happened in a typical case? Someone was sentenced here, had maybe a substance abuse, dual diagnosis, maybe mental health issues, and then what? Somewhere down the road fell off the wagon, used drugs again, alcohol. Is that typical?
Typical, frequently what happens is, let's just say someone has a bipolar diagnosis. They can't afford their meds, they don't go to the doctor, they self-medicate with alcohol. Alcohol's too expensive, they switch over to heroin. That's the most common offender that we see. And so that's the population that we've got right now, and they're sick in terms of mentally, they can't keep up with the level of drugs that they're using, and they commit crimes to get, as you said,
Well,
your
let's talk
neighborhood
about the
person.
crimes then. Sheriff, typical crimes. I mean, we're talking a lot about the social aspect. What about the criminal actions that that often led to folks being incarcerated here? What sort of crimes are you seeing?
Public nuisance.
Public nuisance, distribution of drugs. They're selling drugs to make money, drugs to use drugs. Those type of nuisance crimes that the police deal with every day throughout Norfolk County. And that is what's letting them in front of the judge for a second or third time.
So if you had to, give a percentage of the crimes, the folks that are here that are related to drugs, would you hazard a guess?
80%?
Yeah.
80%?
Yeah.
And it's a guess.
And maybe
yeah.
higher.
Right now it's effective with drugs.
Yes.
Either they're selling drugs, they're buying drugs,
Yeah.
they're using drugs. They're under the influence of drugs and alcohol during the commission of the crime.
Okay.
I would agree
Do you have
with that.
violent offenders here?
Yes.
And do you have violence that takes place in here?
I'll speak in general, and I'll
Yeah.
ask Mary to speak more specifically. We're probably one of the safest facilities in the country. We have one of the lowest inmate-on-inmate conflicts or inmate-on-staff conflicts or incidents. And we do statistically measure that aggressively. We don't underreport. We actually overreport because we deal with consequences and expectations in terms of the offenders and the staff. Our staff is probably the most highly trained in terms of education and qualifications staff easily in the state. Correction officers buy very much, although their job is primarily care and custody, security, making sure everybody's safe here, there are no escapes. They have to come from a different angle than programs. That being said, relatively speaking, our security staff, and I get this from other folks who work in other jails, lawyers who come up here, they say the security staff here is incredibly professional, not always aiming for the highest kind of security approach when just communication will do it. When you walk around here, you see there's not a lot of security barriers between staff and inmate. A lot of communication.
Let me ask you, Mary. Now
Sure.
you hold a Bachelor of Science from Northeast University
Yes.
in Criminal Justice.
Yeah.
Now you're working here. You have a lot of experience here. How different is real life from the theory that you're learning in the classroom?
Well, it's so long ago, as much as I don't want to admit it. But in reality, it's very different.
Well, how much is then the criminal justice system different now than when you first started?
It's very, very different. I think the most important change that I've seen is the collaborations. 10 or 15 years ago, we wouldn't work with police departments, probation officers on rare occasions. We would just receive information and filter it through. Now we talk on the phone, we have meetings with them, they're part of our repeat offender program. We respect each other and work very well together.
That's one of the things that we see that it used to be different silos. There was the police, there was the parole, there was probation, there was the sheriff's department, there was mental health experts, and now there's a much more integrated approach, correct?
Yes, and I think the other thing is that's very, very beneficial to us is we're dealing with all the other counties and the Department of Correction. We get information from the Department of Correction if somebody has wrapped up a sentence up there and is coming to us. They give us all the classification data so we know what we're getting when we get someone in. Also, the other counties, we have quarterly meetings, classification departments, so we exchange inmates, transfers, and we communicate with each other. So not only is it our community partners in law enforcement and criminal justice, it's our own correctional partners. So it works really well for us.
Well, I thank you very much. We got to keep this moving along. We have an awful lot we're trying to get, but Mary Kelly, I'm impressed with you, and I appreciate very much your time.
My pleasure.
Next, we're going to hear from the programs director, who's Bob Cahill, who runs Norfolk's intensive treatment program. This program offers intensive substance abuse services to inmates on a daily basis. As I think Sheriff Bellotti mentioned earlier, studies have shown that some 80% of all reoffenders have a drug or alcohol problem. And this program seeks to meet that problem head on with counseling and education. The program also provides accountability through self-help groups like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. Welcome, Bob, and thanks for joining me.
Happy to be here.
This interview is taking place here at Unit 3, House Unit 3. Tell us a little bit about this unit.
House 3 used to be the gymnasium here a number of years ago, and up until September of last year, it was the new man unit, chaotic, noisy, all new guys coming in. At the direction of Sheriff Bellotti, staff designed an intensive treatment program. This unit was transformed into that. Physically, it's the same, 63 men housed here. These 63 men here are participating in a 90-day program. It's very, very structured, heavily cognitive behavioral. And when I say structured, structured into curriculum, structured in how the unit functions. For example, only place in the facility where lights on at 7:45, 8 o'clock wake-up call, they know my call, and 8:15 feet on the floor, beds made, we're ready to go. And then progressively through the day, there are a series of classes and groups.
So this is the most intensive treatment program in the whole jail?
Yes,
okay.
by far.
So it's 90 days. And is it Mary who chooses who goes into this program?
That's correct. Classification determines based on risk to reoffend.
Yeah.
And criminogenic needs.
What the heck is criminogenic?
New word, relatively new word, buzzword in the industry, but criminogenic, related to crime, the beginning, genesis, where it comes from, what leads to crime. And there's an abundance of evidence developed over the past 10 years in corrections that from a variety of sources, federal programs, federal drug administration, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, Department of Corrections, that's all converged in similar findings, that there are programs targeted at those criminogenic needs, the personal characteristics that have been identified as related to the conduct of crime.
Right, Sheriff, you have how many people here any given day in the whole?
600, 700.
600 or 700 inmates, and you choose, or Mary chooses 63 that would likely benefit the most.
Correct.
From this 90-day intensive treatment program.
Right. Risk to reoffend, substance abuse issues, and criminogenic thinking.
Okay, and you run it, Bob, and so you've been doing it for how long?
Well, I'm a psychologist. I was in private practice for 100 years. I've been here 4 years now, and director of this, we opened it up September of last year.
It is interesting, Sheriff, to see how you have a trained psychologist, not just someone with criminal justice background. It does seem like a fairly enlightened approach. So we have 63 men in here, very structured, lights on, lights off, structured throughout the day. What else do you?
And it's a very structured curriculum for the professionals to deliver. We have a 12-week, for each of the classes we offer, there's a 12-week curriculum. Classes are Thinking for Change, which is a cognitive behavioral, Living in Balance, which is a Hazelden drug abuse program, anger management, a series of, each one of us has a science of addiction. Each of us has a 12-week curriculum. The men are divided into 5 groups. If I'm teaching science of addiction or offering that class, I offer that same class 5 times during the week so that each of the men in here sit in on that class. Thinking for a Change, Lisa Tagg.
Let me ask you, what if a guy doesn't want to be helped or a guy doesn't want to participate?
When someone is classed here,
Guy comes in with attitude.
We'll work on that. We'll work with that. We want to draw them in. But eventually, 2, 3, 4 weeks, I'm making it clear, you're getting your oars in the water. Active participation is a requirement here. You get your oars in the water, I'm going to give you a bed to somebody else.
And so is there almost a competition to get in this group? People do want to get better? Men do want to get into this intensive treatment program?
I think there are some that certainly do, and we have a bit of a waiting list. But that's a classification decision that is made. Some guys are sent here not particularly eager to come, but the men who populate this unit have created a real culture of recovery, and that I consistently refer to the professional staff as we're the wait staff.
Let me ask you this. You talk about the structure, and you know, society has changed, not just folks that are incarcerated, but society has changed. It appears that there's a hell of a lot less structure generally in a lot of our lives. So for some of the folks that are coming in here, is this the first time or one of the few times there's been such structure to their day?
Certainly that's the case with some men. We had a graduation several weeks ago, and for men who had completed here and were over at DAC, and one of the men, might have been mid-40s, we presented a certificate. We got a certificate signed by the sheriffs, and he looked at that and then showed it to the people assembled and said, "This is the first thing I ever completed in my life." And but that's on the more extreme end. Most of these men have held good jobs. They've had stable families, and they've screwed it up. And one of the things I heard shortly after I came here from inmates, and I've heard in one form or another repeatedly, I don't get arrested every time I get drunk or high, but every time I've been arrested, I was drunk or high. And the crimes that the men are in here for, typically assault and battery, breaking and entering, driving under, sale or possession of drugs. People do a lot of dumb things, impulsive things, when intoxicated and or seeking the funds to maintain a drug habit. But these aren't. Again, when I came here, a number of my colleagues said to me, "Bob, that must be so different, me working here rather than in the private sector out in a fancy office building in Hingham." And it must be so different. They must be so different. My answer consistently was, no, they are no different. Their mistakes are different than mine. Their mistakes are different than yours. But the quality of them as human beings, I have a high regard for.
4 years, what's your, as you reflect on your work here, what's your takeaway? What's working and what didn't work?
One of the things we've done over those 4 years at the direction of the Sheriff and Superintendent Paroncello is to study the literature. There's an abundance of literature, research that shows what works. It's called evidence-based programming. Research that tests this particular program and measures the outcomes. Our scorecard here, the only thing that goes up on the scoreboard here is recidivism. And the study that Superintendent Sheriff Bellotti referenced by Northeastern, down the road they're going to give us our score. But we've implemented programs that research in other facilities has shown targets criminogenic behavior. It's evidence-based, it's cognitive behavioral, and it was at the direction of Sheriff Bellotti and Superintendent Paroncello that the program design was moved in that direction.
Well, I thank you for your time and for your work. This is certainly informative for me, and I hope for the folks watching. We're going to also be joined by, after Bob Cahill, and I appreciate your time, by Jim Burgess, a caseworker, and also Alex Mann, a correctional officer. Welcome. And let's talk a little bit about what you do, Jim, here.
Senator, what we basically do, and Deputy Kelly has mentioned it, once we deal with find out why the offender has come in, what are the underlying issues, then we deal with them as caseworkers. While they're here, how do we create the reentry plan? Do they need housing? Do they need education? Do they need a program service? So while they're going through the substance abuse treatment module, as they're getting closer to release, because we know they're all going back into communities that we all live in. So what do they need? Do they need housing? Do they need permanent housing? Do they need a shelter when they get out? Are they going to need a job? Can we get them to some sort of a job placement? The sheriff has resources here for HVAC, culinary arts, and also landscaping programs. So can we get them a marketable skill when they get out of here to be released, something that they
So
can
are
do?
you doing any of that here? Are you teaching them some of those marketable skills? You're teaching them the HVAC work? You're teaching them landscaping skills?
I'm not teaching that, but
I mean,
we do have program providers that do come in and provide that service to us. So they are actually being taught those skills, those actual marketable skills.
And so, Sheriff, we're not talking specifically just this unit. We're talking the entire House of Corrections?
Yeah, programs are tied in, even pretrial, which isn't necessarily true in other facilities. We're working with offenders to the extent that we can, based on limited resources, in kind of statutory limitations with pretrial population. Of course, when they get to the sentence side, there's going to be much more intense programming. There's typically one caseworker assigned to each unit. The caseworker, I mean, if there was an analogy, I'd probably say, I don't know, maybe a probation officer slash human service provider. They're dealing with all the needs and requests of the offender, so that if they have issues with open court cases in other jurisdictions or in Norfolk County, hopefully they're helping them get in the court and clean up other pending issues, and also any internal issue. It could be simple as making sure they've got the right PIN number so they can get on the phone and call a designated list of family and friends, or they have issues with anything from laundry, medical visits. Caseworker helps on that. But beyond that, more and more, and as Jim said, I mean, Jim is a very qualified, well-trained, and has different roles around here. So, he brings a lot in terms of perspective and abilities. We're challenging the caseworkers to become almost like re-entry caseworkers. When you talk re-entry,
So the re-entry, it doesn't take place just here. In
No.
other words, do these folks, these inmates, are they out working at landscaping outfits? Are they out working at HVAC shops, or is it all just here?
While an inmate has stepped down through the program, through classification, as Deputy Kelly mentioned, if they are qualified to go next door to Dedham Alternative Center, that's where they may be working on the landscaping program, because those are people that have shown that they have a little bit more skill. We've given them more personal responsibility, and they've taken that. So they've actually matured and worked and stepped down to be able to have some more opportunities and to use those skills.
Step down, you mean stepping down the level of security?
yes,
And stepping up the level of freedom? So it's kind of a transition?
exactly.
Okay. So there's a transition from here in the House of Corrections for some people, to the Dedham Alternative.
Which is about 1,000 yards outside of the footprint of this facility and complex, which is a whole different and lower level of security. They call it minimum security level. So it's less security intense, but it's more program extensive and intense.
Okay, how many inmates do you work with, Jim?
My rough population right now is about 94.
About 94.
Yes.
And your role is specifically to try to help them with their transition back to the community.
Yeah, I'm dealing with sentence inmates right now, and I really want them to succeed. And so how do they succeed? Can they, while they're in here, are they dealing with problems with their family? Are they having issues with their children? How can we help to address those while they're inside? And if we can't, can we refer them to an outside program? One of the good things that we've done here is referrals to outside programs.
Where do you draw the line? I mean, you can't get too involved in an inmate's personal life.
You really don't, and you try not to take it home. But again, they're coming out to the communities that we all live in, and so we really want them to succeed. And you can only do so much. It's when they just determine they want to take the responsibility on their own. I have an inmate here who's been incarcerated since he was 15 years old, starting in the juvenile setting. He's 18 years old here now. And he came to me not too long ago and said, Jimmy, I have no skills. Don't know what to do. I don't know how to balance a checkbook. I don't know how to get a job. I don't know how to write a resume. So we're working with him to try to get him those resources. And he's been accepted now to North Cottage, which is a long-term treatment program, which is something that we work as they step down, as he's going to get released, and he'll be able to really work on those issues that he has while he's down in that program.
Alex, you're the security end of it. Tell me a little bit about your job.
My day is basically spent maintaining the peace and keeping everything flowing, tracking who's going where, making sure they get to their right classes, making sure that the classes that occur in this particular unit, that they're complying with their expectations. So I'm a support system to them, but I'm also a support system to the program staff that are here. So I spend a lot of my time as an intermediary, kind of making sure everybody's on track.
How long have you worked here?
15 years.
And have you seen much of a change over 15 years?
Specifically with this unit, I have to admit, I've had this unit at various stages between a workers unit to a new man unit to this unit now. There is a definite change. There's an interesting switch of how security programs, classification are all working together on focusing in on this group of people and getting them ready to kind of come back out. There is a genuine interest on all the parties that are in here and assigned to this unit to see that they succeed, not just getting back out into the community, but with their substance abuse problems, because for the most part, there's very few people who haven't been touched between alcohol or drug abuse. So there is a desire to kind of see these guys succeed.
Is there a difference in the inmates? Are you seeing the same people, same type of person, same, you know, I don't know.
Same themes?
Same themes and also same criminal behavior that landed a person here today as 15 years ago?
Well, there's 15 years of experience behind that now. I think that for the most part we see a lot of people who, if they weren't having problems with drugs and alcohol, they may not have gotten in a fight with their, or an argument with their wife, or they wouldn't have had to break into a place to steal something to feed their habit. That really hasn't changed. What I have noticed is there is a group of people, you're asking guys to come in here and actually open up about who they are, their addiction issues, their personal issues, which doesn't normally happen in a correctional setting. And they have to kind of lay themselves bare in front of a whole lot of other men that they don't normally do this with, and kind of try and move forward. That is a huge switch that I've seen. That's not something I've ever experienced.
You know, it's interesting, Sheriff. I've been in some of the state prisons, and there is just no hope. I mean, some of the state prisons, to me, were more horrific than I had ever even envisioned. Folks that are incarcerated for some of the most heinous crimes go into these state prisons that long sentences, life sentences, just to me, probably worse conditions than even folks would imagine. And yet, when you come here, people are here for a short time, and it seems like you're also offering a little bit of hope about the future. And it just seems to be a whole different attitude, a whole different sense here than I get in a state prison.
I mean, there is, and because we're a little bit closer to the ground level with the courts and the police and all the different programs we've alluded to, we're more vested, we're more engaged. You know, it's an elected position, and people say, geez, do you really need an elected sheriff? It creates incredible accountability and accessibility. It's a whole different feel. All the stakeholders in Norfolk County, inside and out of these four walls, are becoming more and more focused on the offender through informal and formal agreements and partnerships, invested in those areas, those factors we've alluded to several times. So there's a higher energy, more engagement level with everybody. We'll go as far as bringing an offender down to roll call at Quincy or another police station and say, this guy, he's been here for 9 months, he's done great with programming, but he is coming back. And we've told him there's a two-pronged approach. The police know where you are. If you need any help, we're still available, or probation or parole. We want to assist in your recovery, in you completely transitioning into a, you know, successfully. On the other hand, they do know where you live because we're bringing you in front of the roll call. And if you start distributing drugs again or getting into those bad habits that led you here, there's going to be a higher awareness with the police. So it's that two-pronged approach. We're public safety. That's our first and foremost job. 220 in uniform here on a good given day, in about 80 non-uniform. So that tells you right there what the legislature, the executive office, and historically what our role is: public safety. But more and more, we've got to understand that they're coming back, and we need to attack those issues. Otherwise, I mean, do you really want someone going back and living next to your mother or your grandmother who committed a series of crimes, but there's no real connection or monitoring or challenging through programs when they get back into your community? I think if you ask that question, look at it that way, the average citizen says, no, I want to make sure the sheriff's office is doing those type of things that we're doing. And I think what Alex talked to, and Alex is a great example of, you know, the type of staff we have here. I mean, he's not just sitting here saying, It's my job to make sure they go to bed at a certain time and lock them down. He has basically said he's bought into the mission. You know, that's a paradigm shift in corrections. In the offenders that come in this unit, what they do is incredible in terms of their buy-in. But that's where we have to go in corrections. If we're going to save money and reduce crime, we have to shift into that, you know, always re-entering and transitioning role by attacking those deficits. And, you know, Alex is an example of the staff we have around here.
Alex, a stressful job?
It can be. There are days that you kind of shake it off and you go home and you forget about it. But there are days you realize that you made an impact. In this unit alone, I've had guys kind of come up and just before they leave, as an example today, one of them today said, you know what, you actually made a difference for me, thanks. I appreciate everything you did for me. I didn't see that coming.
Let me ask you, Sheriff, do you see most of these fellows getting visits?
Yeah, oh yeah. You know, we're very strong on visits, and I think one of the few jails in the state that still has contact visits. Mm-hmm. You know, if you wanted to be overly security conscious, you'd say you don't want the offenders touching their girlfriend or family members because they could pass drugs off. But our theory is it's up to staff and us in the offender to know what the rules are, to apply the rules, and to always be on our toes to make sure you know, best practices are in place and the offenders will meet strong consequences. So we could easily just put a plexiglass up or limit visits and do remote visits through you know, through new technology, you know, and do things off-site. But we believe that the visits is part of the entry. They're talking to their family. It's a challenge for us because it does increase the chance of drugs getting in here. That's a fact, and that's always going to be an issue. But we'll take that balanced against vesting in the offender and letting them know we see this as important to you, that you have that contact, that you're eyeballing that family member right across the table. There's always security staff with them, and you know, again, we could take two approaches here: go heavy security, make everybody look and feel safe, or continually challenge us all as individuals and collectively in challenging, you know, and creating an environment that creates expectations and, you know, punishment and consequences if you don't play by the rules.
Jim Burgess, how long have you been here?
19 years.
And what is the best part of your job?
Being here with me right now.
Exactly, sir. Other than that, the best part of my job is when you see someone on the street that wasn't here.
So if you see someone on the street, you're walking down the street, you see someone that you knew from here, you're not hiding your face and saying, oh, geez whiz, I hope he doesn't.
19 years ago, I was like, oh God, what's going to happen? You know, what's the reaction going to be? But I think it's the philosophy that comes down from the top, from the sheriff, that says, you know, we're here to help you. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to help you. And if you have that respect and mutual respect between the inmate and the staff, that goes a long way. And so when you see them back out on the street and they actually say, hey, I'm doing all right, I'm doing good, and you really hope they are. And for the most part, you know, they are. And I mean, I know my community, there's a number of them that are here that are incarcerated, and they're going to get back out, and you hope for the best. You really do. And so I'm not afraid to see them, because I know the respect that we have, and it's a philosophy from the top down.
Terrific. Jim and Alex, thank you very much. Appreciate you joining me. And now we're going to hear from one of those inmates, Robert Draper, who's going to talk to us a little bit about his experience both before and during his time here at the House of Corrections in Norfolk County. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I spoke with Robert for about 2 minutes before the camera came on, and he's an exceptionally well-spoken, articulate guy. How'd you end up here?
Well, in this unit? Or
in jail?
In jail in general. I have a history of alcohol and drug abuse, and my actions have brought me to situations in life where I've overreacted and acted incorrectly due to my alcohol and drug related problems. I have a violent nature where I would be aggressive towards people instead of knowing. I basically didn't know how to cope with my anger issues, and so I would be aggressive for most parts, and that would lead me to assault and battery, and that's why I'm here now.
How old are you?
42 years old.
Grew up where?
In Boston.
In Boston. And you have a family?
I do. I'm married. I have 3 beautiful children.
Okay. And your family is in Norfolk County?
Yes, Norfolk County.
Okay. So you're a physically fit, strong guy.
Construction.
And construction worker. So you've had an anger issue in the past, fueled by alcohol and drugs?
I wouldn't say fueled by alcohol, but more as a background. I grew up in an alcoholic home, and so there's some underlying issues there where things that were normally the education level in my home, as far as emotional education, I guess it would be a good term, wasn't really prevalent. I had problems. I'd never realized or knew how to express myself. So
well, let me tell you, you do it quite well now. You're as well spoken as the psychologist that was in that chair a few minutes ago.
I kind of learned on the fly how to live, and unfortunately, I picked up alcohol at a young age, and it stunted my emotional growth. And this leads to bad decisions, poor judgment, and unfortunately, criminal activity.
Are you a repeat offender?
I am.
How long have you been here this time?
6 months this time.
How long have you been in this intensive treatment program?
4 months.
Is it working?
It certainly is. I believe it is.
How do you know?
Well, when I walked in the door of this institution, I was very despondent, very negative. I found myself back in an institution where I didn't want to be, didn't ever plan on being here again. And I didn't see much of a light at the end of the tunnel. I'd just been sentenced to a year and a half, and I just was really, really down. And at classification, I was asked whether or not I had a drug or alcohol problem, and I said yes. And they said, well, we have a treatment program now. To my knowledge, there was a treatment program here before, but it was not as intensive as this. Anyway, I volunteered to come. I was classified
Were
here.
you in this facility once before?
I was, back in 1996.
And did not have any sort of, were you just housed then? Were you?
No, I was doing a sentence. I did.
But when you were doing a sentence, were you just locked up? Were you involved in any programs?
No, I was not. At that point, I was not recovery bound at all. I didn't want to be in jail. I was a lot younger.
1996, you were incarcerated here for how long?
I believe I did a year.
A year. And so, what did you do every day? What was your?
I smoked and joked my way through it.
Okay.
Basically, I didn't try to change anything that was going on with my life.
Okay, so we heard earlier from Mary Kelly that the first 72 hours upon release are critical. You got out in, say, 97. Did your behavior change? Did you?
Let me reiterate a little bit. At the end of that sentence, I did go through a program. There was a boot camp program here. Back in,
before I was here, yeah.
I did a little. There was a little bit of a program there, and I did try to get some help, and it was a good 4-month program, I believe it was, and that helped me when I got onto the streets. So I did a little self-help while I was in, towards the end of the sentence, and when I did get out, I settled down. I started a family. I settled down. I got married, started a family, and for the next 10 years, I stayed relatively out of trouble. But due to my alcoholism and drug addiction, I was brought back into the system again through my own actions.
So during that 10-year period, you were working, providing for your family, still
Yes.
using drugs, still
Yes, sir.
using alcohol?
Yes.
Okay, so now you come back in here, and you're told at the classification that there's a more intensive program. Were you asked whether you wanted to participate?
Yes, I was asked. It was voluntary.
And you wanted to?
I did.
Why?
Well, as I had said, I felt I was in a very negative frame of mind when I came in. I thought I had lost everything. I thought I'd lost my family. My whole life was turned upside down. And I was grasping at the first positive thing that came my way, which was the offer to come here and possibly change my life.
So I'm sorry, you're here 4 months now?
4 months in this program now.
And your sentence is for how long?
A year and a half.
In how long? You've been incarcerated for 4 months?
I've been incarcerated for six.
For six,
4 in this program.
Okay, a year and a half. Now, do you serve the full, Sheriff? Serve the full year and a half, or is there a?
Earn good time, which is I think about 7 days a month. Are you getting the full earn good time?
Yes, I
by
am.
virtue of being here. So that will
Being in this program,
is essentially
he gets to take
full
7 days per month off his sentence if he's really trying to turn it around here. Okay.
So, so his sentence will be shortened by that. Okay, and not to get specific about what his record is, but if there were mandatory sentencing restrictions, then that prevents us from putting a lot of these guys over next door, the Dedham Alternative Center, which is minimum security again, because it's the way the laws are written. So as they're stepping down, that is always, of course, from their perspective, that's an obstacle. But that's the way the legislature wrote the laws. I was there, but it is restrictive in terms of the reentry. This issue's always been debated about mandatory.
Okay.
So ideally, you want them going from here into a lower level of security. Again, earning that freedom, a little more reentry type stuff, programming next door. That would be the goal.
So let me go back to Robin. I'm fascinated, frankly, by your personal experience because you are clearly a bright, articulate guy.
Thank you.
And one of the things the sheriff and I talked about earlier. I often think there, but for the grace of God, go any one of us with the scourge of alcoholism and drug addiction. You mentioned your family. You were afraid of losing them. So now you're in here. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, sure.
Or are you willing to? Sorry.
I am. It's very touching. Well, to me, it's my story, right?
Yeah.
When I came in, my wife had enough. She's been with me for 12 years, and she had pretty much decided that she didn't want to deal with my alcoholism anymore. And I hadn't been incarcerated for over a decade, but she didn't want to put my family. She didn't want to put the children through it. She didn't see the any positive outcome of having to stay married, basically. So. She was filing for divorce, and I had never been incarcerated with children before, so I'm thinking I lost everything in my world. Is gone. My whole identity is gone. So coming to this program, I was just emotionally bankrupt, and through going to the meetings and the daily group sessions here, and partaking in just one-on-one sessions with different counselors and other inmates that are going through some of the similar situations, I started to get hope back in my life, and with that came my family. I gave my, what we call in the program, my self-will, I gave it up. I stopped trying to do things my way and started accepting the fact that things were out of my control and I needed help. I had to ask for help, and whatever comes from that would be beneficial to me. And as they say in the program, good things will come if you're willing to work for them. And they certainly have. My wife has decided to try to make things work. She's willing to work through. We're going to try to stabilize our marriage. My children are. I'm back in contact. There was a period where I was not in contact with my children. I'm back in contact with my children. So my life is slowly coming back a little, whereas I need to still to concentrate on my own issues. And this intensive treatment program has been such an eye-opener. Like I said, I'm a repeat offender, and I've done time in other institutions, and never has there been such an immense amount of recovery offered to me in one spot. I expected maybe a couple of meetings, maybe go to an AA meeting and maybe listen to someone tell me about their story. I never expected the level of intensity that this treatment program has, and it's opened my eyes and it's given me hope for my life.
So this was a 90-day program? But Robert's been in it for 4 months.
Right. Again, the greatest challenge we have is moving people, ideally, the way we'd like to this facility, because we are public safety. We're overcrowded. You know, it was built for 300 offenders or inmates. We house anywhere up to 700 inmates. So,
But it seems, I mean, he's clearly benefiting, and it's a truly remarkable story. So it seems to me he would want to stay in here as long as he could, right?
It's beneficial for me to stay in this unit because there's a constant supply of positive feedback coming from all different directions. And also,
Are you afraid at all what's going to happen when you either leave this unit or when you leave this institution?
there's always one of the things I need to do in my life is to learn to have my self-esteem and my self-confidence rebuilt because of the crutch of alcohol and drugs in my life. So there's always going to be a little bit of fear of the unknown, of what may happen. But I believe gaining the self-respect for myself, not to be actively engaged in alcoholism or drugs, I can conquer that fear. I can move on with my life.
Well, let me tell you, I'm very impressed with you and your effort. I don't know what's in your past, but I think your future is positive if you keep that attitude. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Welcome back. I'm Senator Brian Joyce, and that was a pretty powerful piece with Robert Draper, who was quite impressive. Quite impressive. I hope he does succeed, and for him and his wife and children. I do have one more guest before we wrap up with Sheriff Bellotti. It's Assistant Superintendent Patty Spataro to talk a little bit about, I guess, what folks can do that are watching if they want to get involved and help with this reentry. You know, as the sheriff articulated, these are men who live in our community, who live in Norfolk County, who have typically, because of drugs and alcohol, committed aberrant behavior, have you know, been violent or drunk driving or theft. Hopefully, through these intensive treatment programs, turning their lives around, they can go back to being productive, tax-paying citizens. Patty, what can a person out there watching, a volunteer, employer, or just someone that wants to help their fellow man, what can they do?
Well, we've had a lot of changes over the last few years in our reentry services and program services here at the jail. And most recently, about a year ago, we were the recipients of a federal grant, the Second Chance Act. And at the same time, Volunteers of America in Massachusetts, they were the recipients of a second grant for mentoring. So we do have volunteers that come into our facility on a regular basis, but one of the things people can do in the community is to come in and try to help the men by being partners with our facility.
Robert, that was just here. Does he have a mentor?
He does. He does. And the way that works is if an individual wants to be a mentor from the community, they get in touch with Volunteers of America and they send an application in to us. We go through a process where we approve all volunteers coming into the facility. We train them, we show them the facility, provide them a little bit of instruction. And it's an easy job. Basically, they come into the facility, we pair them up. Classification sits down with Volunteers of America and with program staff. We pair people up one-on-one, so someone would have one inmate assigned to them. And they're basically getting to know the person. They come in on a weekly basis, they sit down, and they're willing to come in and talk, to listen, to be somebody who can be there to encourage them. They work with the men right when they first come into the facility, so they spend that time to get to know them, and as they step down to lower security, they might be that person who would say, take someone out into the community to go on a job interview, go to a career center, set up AA meetings, go to college to enroll in a college program before they get out.
What inspires these volunteers? Are they folks who just, out of the goodness of their heart want to help their fellow man, or are they folks that have been through some tough times themselves, or just, I guess, a variety? Or
a variety. Literally, it's a little of both. There are people that are coming in who are doing this just because they have some time and they want to give back to the community in some way. We have people who are former offenders who have their lives on track and they want to give back. They feel they have something valuable to say to the men that are here, and truly they do.
How long have you been at this?
I've been working here at Norfolk County for about 6 years, but I've been in corrections for 25 years or so.
And what have you seen change? I've asked this question of all the guests. What have you seen change over your career in 25 years?
Well, I've worked in different types of facilities. I worked in the State Department of Correction. I worked in corrections in New Jersey as well. Here at Norfolk County, what I hear most from the people who've worked here for many, many years is that the type of offender has changed. They've seen this go from kind of a, more of an older OUI population to a population that's a little younger, different types of drug abuse, people that are here for more serious, more violent charges.
So the prior offenders, more alcohol, newer offenders, more drugs, and sometimes more violence. What do you think the future is of corrections? It seems like there's been a real evolution during your career from just, lock them up and throw away the keys to taking this, as Sheriff Bellotti talks about, this integrated approach of different disciplines. Where do we go going forward?
Well, our focus has been, as we've been talking all along here, on reentry. And one of the things that I think the public would like to see is they want to see us doing the right things to be sure that people are prepared for a release to the community. The answer isn't building more jails and locking people up for a longer period of time. The price is too high for us to pay as a community. And when I say price, I'm talking about financial as well as emotional. I mean, we have the more people commit crimes, the more costly it is for the community to incarcerate people, the more costly it is for police and law enforcement and for the court system. But we also have a price to pay with victims. Victims, there's an emotional balance. When you talk to Robert talked about his own family and the price that they've had to pay, his wife and his children, for him being locked up here. So I think what we're trying to do is give people the tools that they can use so that when they get out, they have a more positive outlook, that the path that they can choose will be better for them. And really, that's what reentry is all about.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Patty. And we're going to just wrap up with Sheriff Bellotti and the final segment. Well, this has been one of the more interesting shows that I've hosted. Thank my friend Sheriff Mike Bellotti. Just a couple of final thoughts from the Norfolk County House of Correction. The difference here, I didn't want folks out there watching to think we're soft on crime, we're coddling folks. Everybody here in the House of Corrections is getting out.
They're getting out.
So you talk an awful lot about reentry. It's inevitable. The longest a person can be housed here is 2.5 years, but the average term is
3 to 4 months.
3 to 4 months. Okay, so we differentiate from the, I guess, the more serious criminals that are in the state penal institutions that have longer sentences, and indeed some of them have lifetime sentences. Folks here, typically drug and alcohol, as we've talked about quite a bit. Some offenses that were related to feeding that habit of stuff. But your focus is getting folks back into society and productively contributing rather than being a burden, as Patty put pretty artfully. I'm impressed.
Thank you. Well, first I want to thank you for your help over the years. I know that in the legislature you have your hands in everything, particularly the Bond and Financing Committee, which is important in terms of that infrastructure meeting the goals and the mission that the legislation and the governor sets. So I want to thank you for your leadership in that area, plus Ways and Means and Transportation. You are known as one of the hardest working legislators, and having you involved in our issues, our mission, and coming here and getting either further educated, it means a lot to staff into the population here. So it's always, I've always recognized it, but I think now it's even more forefront. So thank you for that. We're all about reducing crime. So if people are sitting home thinking this is kind of feel good, which I don't think they will, because based on the fact that we've doing everything in terms of empirical evidence, evidence-based programming, but we're not creating programs just to kill time or to even better management of the inmate population. It's all tied to serious, scientifically proven curriculum that leads to less reoffending. So when an inmate, an offender leaves here, by the time they end up completely untethered by the criminal justice system, particularly the sheriff's office, they have earned their way through accountability, through challenging, through different monitoring, drug testing, community service, and tied to all those factors that lead to reoffense. Now, tomorrow I could bring in a poetry class and say that's a great way, it's creative thinking, but if we can't prove that that particular class is tied to lessening the risk of reoffending, we're not doing it anymore, because resources are limited, time is limited, and it's not going to lead to a safer Norfolk County. Everything has to be justified in that level, the economics of it and public safety. And that's what this is all about, public safety.
Well, that's our final thought. I hope that you've enjoyed this program. I am very grateful for Sheriff Mike Bellotti and for his very capable staff. I'm very grateful for the inmates to share their time with us here today. I think Mike is panning over to the folks who have signed letters indicating they're okay with being shown on television in this worldwide broadcast. So to Robert Draper and all you other guys, we wish you the very best, and we thank the staff and the sheriff, and we look forward to seeing you, the viewers, on our next show.
Thank you. Thanks, Senator.